Hello and welcome back to Roll the Bones. My name is Rob. I'm joined by Mike for an emergency recording. We had the great pleasure of playing the final instalment of Let's Dig Up White Plume Mountain, excellently DM'd by Michael. We had an excellent time concluding what we generally suggested was a harsh but fun module. And we had a great time.
We did.
Yeah, really, really great time. Went to check the recordings to release, and everyone's audio is great apart from mine, which was missing. I've been doing a watch back for preparation material on some of the Knights of the Knights of the Apocalypse campaign, and there was that session where exactly the same thing happened, where we had like a big rooftop fight, but yeah, none of my audio picked up. So it's my fault. It's all my fault. So Michael has very kindly jumped on with me, and we're gonna do a sort of a breakdown of how the module concluded, and we'll give our brief thoughts on that, because it was such a shame to let the story go without giving a sign off for those that have been enjoying it. So yes, over to you, Mike. What happened on the last session of White Plume Mountain?
Well, that's absolutely bizarre, as I should be asking what happened to you.
I know, right? What happened in your game that I didn't record properly?
Yes. Well, firstly, let's just recap in... You know what? I'm going to bring you over, and if you want, we can just do a guided narrative as a sort of a recap.
Sure.
There we are.
And
what I can do is I can also give you control here. So we can do that. So we can move them together. So we're currently at the end of the session here, where the
end of the last session. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The Dwarven duo had taken all three paths. They had finished collecting Black Razor from... Let's make this a bit more tense, shall we? They had finished collecting Black Razor from the Western Path. Problem was, as I'm sure you will remember, there was trying to escape from the inverted ziggurat. Didn't go to plan.
Yeah, so
very briefly, you remember?
Yeah, we had previously fascinated the manticores to then go into the chamber where we spoke to the halfling. That was all covered last time, so we don't need to go over that. But yes, we retrieved Black Razor, this terrifying sword, whose origins stem from another dimension. And upon leaving that chamber where we had collected the sword, the manticores were no longer fascinated, and we felt it would be quite easy to hit them with the same spell, Fascinate, but they passed it by, I believe, one each.
Yeah, something like that. It was unfortunate.
So got absolutely savaged by them, which was pretty bad.
However, even though there was a savagery and a brutal mauling, I think, was it Spittake who took another artillery of pins?
He took all of the spines from the manticore, that's right, and it hit him like a machine gun.
Yeah. But you were triumphant, albeit battered, in defeating them, climbing out of the inverted ziggurat, and then navigating through the traps on the way back, taking your time through the heated corridor, gliding back over the pit. And in fact, actually, the frictionless room, not a problem. You had slippers that gave you spider climbing, and you could just walk over the ceiling.
Yes.
And I do imagine those slippers to be very, smoking jacket old
grandfatherly, yes.
Yeah. And then the Sphinx posed her riddle again about the altar of the Lupine Lords, the answer being...
Moon.
Yes. Spoilers. That was back to session 1, actually, or session 0.5.
Yeah.
And you proceeded through. You found that the threats that had been dealt with before were, well, they died out. With the hag gone, the Chul sort of just was left to perish. And you went straight north. You went through 3 heavy doors, to which I think my favourite comment was, if there's another door behind this door, I'm going to go livid.
Yeah.
And, yeah, do you remember what's behind the final door?
Yeah, behind the final door, there was this massive membrane that was holding back a massive amount of water. It was like we'd stepped through one of those see-through tunnels in an aquarium, completely surrounded by water. And at the far end, we saw a chest that was guarded by a monstrous, huge crab.
You forgot advanced.
So I'm so sorry. He was an advanced monstrous.
Huge advanced monstrous.
Huge advanced crab. Monstrous crab. Pardon me.
And oh boy.
Oh boy, yes. I joked like it was like fighting Poseidon. It felt like it was. And he had got us in its grasp, and all seemed lost when Drast remembered picking up something from the kobold's body, that of the worm, pulling forth the worm's keen rapier, and delivered a critical strike to the crab at the last second, and rolled on the random critical effects chart. Meant that it got stunned, and mechanically in 3.5 when you're stunned you drop everything you hold. So it was literally the best thing that he could have rolled. The crab was stunned, which just allowed them to pour attack after attack after attack upon it, defeating it and claiming wave, which transpires as a trident, also adding to the Poseidon theory. And
Yes.
and we recovered it, and we learned something terrible about that room, I recall.
Yes, which was the actual the setup of those 3 heavy doors. That room itself was the source of the white plume from White Plume Mountain. It was the heated steam. And that membrane was probably created magically from the water. It was a thin membrane that was all that was keeping the rest of the dungeon from being flooded. In fact, the stagnant water that fills White Plume Mountain was the fallout from a previous breach. And those 3 doors are all that would stop it.
Oh, wow. And that's why it's stagnant, because it's like volcanic water.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
And if you or the crab had accidentally... I mean, the crab doesn't want to, trust me, because that would be a hot pot. And it would just... it wouldn't survive. Neither would you. Even if you could breathe underwater, it would scald and burn you to death. But it would take 1d4 plus 1 rounds to fill up.
That's death.
And considering how heavy those doors are...
Yeah, those doors were an insane DC to heave open, and neither of us are really super strong.
And that was the thing. I mean, out of combat, I was like, okay, I'll wave. The 2 of you can do it. But in combat, that's a set DC to make it in that turn.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're playing the module as written, so that we would expect no quarter. But thankfully, none of that transpired. We beat the crab without blowing the whole place to being submerged with volcanic water, and successfully escaped with wave. We had finally got all the weapons.
Yes, and after a brief tangent to deal with a werewolf, Snarler and Burkett, you then headed south and you were greeted not with the familiar sight of the Sphinx, but with what appeared to be Caraptis.
Caraptis himself, yes.
And he proposed to you that, as you had taken his weapons and destroyed all his guards, the best thing would be to surrender yourselves to his servant Zonn-Zin, who would then take you to an indoctrination centre.
Yes.
Now, that wasn't going to happen, was it?
Not if Drast and Spittake have anything to do about it, with it. And they just advanced. They're not clever enough to have a back and forth with him, so...
They... which is... honestly, I was kind of expecting that, which is... let's get a bit of tense music to underscore this moment. So, do you remember the first things that happened in the combat?
I think he went first, right?
He did, and he set up a few things. One was a quickened firebolt that appeared to come from him, and the other was a wall of fire.
Yeah.
And the wall of fire just attempting to, at this point, not so much separate the two of you from each other, but to just add another obstacle if you wanted to get to Caraptis.
Yeah.
And that seemed to set him up quite well. And then how was your reaction?
I'm not going to be able to give a turn-by-turn account of what I did, Mike, to be honest with you.
Oh, no, I'm not expecting a turn-by-turn. Don't worry. I'm just
well, Spittake tried to fire through it, first of all. He tried, as I recall, he moved forward to get into range, and since he leveled up since last time, his range had doubled. So his line can now make 60 feet. So I think that was his action. I think he opened fire through the blaze. And I think he did it with an ice blast.
No, you did
fire?
You did fire because you attempted to ensnare and entangle Caraptis.
Oh yeah, that's
you
right.
Then discovered that it didn't work because it was but an illusion.
An illusion.
And actually, there was no Caraptis was never there.
Never there.
Caraptis has been busy hiding somewhere, and it was always his servant Zonn-Zin who was attempting to deceive you with his permanent image. And
Zonn-Zin is an Afriti. Did you say that?
He was... Oh, well, I did not, but yes, Zonn-Zin is an Afriti. And do you remember the next, big moment?
Well, from Spittake's perspective, he attempted to just push through the fire, and he rushed the firewall, and attempted as best as he could to step through it. Step through the wonderful animated tokens, I will add. But not only passing through the fire, even approaching the wall of fire does damage, we learned. A savage amount of damage.
I have just, on a side note here, I have greatly underestimated Wall of Fire as a spell.
Yeah, it's powerful, man.
It's just the base damage to go through it, or if you cast it on someone.
Yeah.
But you also have within 10 feet and outside of 10 feet.
I'll be using it in the future. I was like, that's a fantastic spell to use on a corridor, as we learned in this scenario.
Thank you to the writers for that horrible.
Yeah, well, it gets worse as we learn. To our detriment.
And do you remember what happened when you stepped through?
So he took fire approaching, fire going through. And then that triggered further effects down the corridor, I believe.
It did. Now, I can give you more information at this point.
Yeah, my memory's hazy on what the order was, and I didn't want to give it away. Yeah.
The Gynosphinx had set up symbols on all 4 entrances.
That's right.
You remember every time you approached from the south, she seemed to suppress something.
Yes, that's right, she did, yeah. You were very careful to say that every time she zapped away some power that lay latent there.
She also had you, every time you went in a direction, she had both of you say the answer to a riddle.
Yeah.
That answer is what protected you from each symbol. Didn't last for long, it was only like a minute, but it's enough that you both would say river, moon, or coffin, or in your case, hinges. And that was enough to suppress it so you could both go through.
Yeah.
And there was times when I was trying to subtly kind of say, I need both of you to say it, as opposed to just Dom saying it, otherwise one of you would have taken the hit.
Yeah, it didn't dawn on me at all, to be honest. My brain, I was like, oh, the Sphinx is gone, so...
but unfortunately,
yeah.
You triggered through a symbol of sleep, and the symbol of sleep is so much more potent than a sleep spell.
Yeah.
It can affect up to your level, which was 10 hit die, and nothing can wake it except a magical means.
Yeah, only magical means. So I was under the impression that. So I my next thing was like, oh, I better go and wake up Drast, because Spit Take was fine, but yeah, Drast not so much. Drast fell asleep.
Yeah,
which was not good.
And the problem wasn't so much that. Yes, he was out of the fight for the moment, but he was 2 feet in water, so as per the rules, if he fell asleep in that corridor, you start drowning, which meant he had 3 rounds before he was dead. So the 3.5 drown mechanic, if you lose breath, which is your constitution, it's twice your constitution score, not modifier, in rounds.
Yeah.
So if your average is 10... that would be 20 rounds, which is 2 minutes, which kind of makes sense for a normal person, I guess.
Yeah.
So there would have been time, but being asleep, you automatically fell. Round 1, you fall unconscious. Round 2, you're dying, so -1, and round 3, you're dead. And it got to the second round where he was dying that you... If I remember, you dragged him around...
Spit went back through the fire.
Yeah.
So he went back through the fire, taking even worse damage than he had when he went through.
Yeah.
But thanks to his increased movement with the magic item, the boots that he got in the dungeon, it meant that his move speed was better. And also his swim speed was still active. So he basically dragged Drast through to this chamber back here. Back through to the chamber where the worm had been killed and where Dom's character, Dritkar, had also been slain.
Yes.
And we fell back here, basically, and that was where he then moved the firewall up as well.
He conjured another firewall. He could do 3 of them, and he used all 3. Now, at this point, there was a lot of back and forth. You used Cure Serious Wounds, or Cure Mod, to bring back...
Yeah, I believe so.
Drast. But because he was dying at that point, he wasn't then going to wake up asleep. So we said because he was dying, that kind of just nullified the sleeping status. And at this point, rules as written, there was a lot of a back and forth because Zonn-Zin's plans is to lure them out using the symbols and to set firewalls and traps and expect, because in his eyes they have to leave eventually.
Yeah, eventually they're going to come back through.
Yeah, but we got to a back and forth where there was quite a few rounds where he was staying in either gaseous form or he was invisible, one of the two.
Frustratingly, yes.
Waiting to ambush. But when he realised that the two of you, stubborn dwarfs that they are, were never going to do that.
Yeah, we just go back and hide in the mountain, and not only that, we smash through our remaining health potions, so effectively took this as a way to heal.
Yeah. Which absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, partly, I exhausted everything that the Afriti had in terms of an ambush. And if I was really going to play by the book, I would have happily rolled it out. But that would have been, and just waited until you guys also caved in. That would have been the worst, dullest ending to a session we could have ever done.
Which, yeah, it makes sense, but we were both like, well, we're not moving and you're not moving, so it was like, right, we'll resolve it this then. And we fought, and it was, yeah.
And yes, so I did what I think he had left that he could have done before then making that attempt. So the two of you had gone further around the corner.
Yeah, we backed right up.
There
we
for the
right
moment.
On the edge where we remembered the...
And you weren't on the ledge.
That's right, because Spittake, like a seal with his swim speed, was sat over here trying to lure him out. So it was like basically trying to like sit on an angle here and but be far enough so we would be diverting the Afriti's attention to definitively one of us, so he couldn't get us with like an area of effect spell or something. Yeah.
And then he tried two things, which is a shame because the few things he does have to start with are brutally powerful, like his Scorching Ray, the Wall of Fire.
Yeah.
Then he has a very low DC for one of his popular spells, Pyrotechnics, where he takes a source of fire, and it says here, his Wall of Fire is one of them, and will try to either blind them using the fireworks effect, which, for both of you, you resisted it very well.
Thankfully.
And also to create a smoke cloud to hide in, which he did use.
Yeah.
And the smoke cloud for Pyrotechnics is like any of the fog spells. It actually gives you dark vision prevention. So even as dwarfs, you wouldn't have been able to see through it, which worked for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he set himself up right on the edge, hoping to basically step out and get a full round of attacks, which he did, but you unleashed readied actions.
That's right. We basically were there, guns pointing at the door. And yeah, he came through, and the spit take anyway, it was a case of just repeatedly firing on all cylinders with his ice blasts. And you know, he was getting him fairly often, but he dodged a few as well, to be fair. It's not like he was like getting sustained maximum damage on him. He kept clipping him and stuff, and yeah, as you prompted, Drast made to make an attack against him using his inspirational powers as a factotum, but then found himself surrounded by a circle of fire. I don't actually know what the name of this spell was, actually.
It's Wall of Fire, but you can conjure Wall of Fire in two ways.
Oh, cool, right, yeah. Like Wall of Force.
Straight line or as a circular. And for a moment, the Gatling gun artillery of Spittake was doing some excellent suppression, but Drast was taking quite a beating, and he, again, was very close to this Wall of Fire. He went underneath it to mitigate some of the direct damage, but was still taking the proximity damage of it. And Zonn-Zin not only got like a Scorching Ray on you, but he got a full attack on Dom. And I remember Dom saying he got to 12 hit points.
Yeah, Drast was basically on his last hurrah here, yeah.
He was. But he also did a few other things. Drast finally revealed his spells.
Yes, he had spells the whole time, yeah.
And he'd just not been using them.
Yes.
One of them was Defenestrating Sphere, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Which, again, would have been brilliant, but he then fell unconscious, so the spell ceased. And then he had Power Word Deafen.
Oh, yeah.
Which did force Zonn-Zin to check for his Scorching Ray and his Wall of Fires. Fortunately, his DC's pretty solid for that, but still, he was holding a bit defensive.
Yeah, so to explain, because it was Power Deafen, when you're deafened, you get a penalty to anything with... Was it verbal components, right?
Yeah, verbal component. Any spell that requires a verbal component has a 20% miscast.
That was right, yeah, and it didn't affect him, I don't think, but it still was something. It forced him to do more rolls.
Yes. Yeah. And then, whilst the Gatling, the two pinnacle moments for Drast at this point. One, weakened Drast went in for an attack and completely fluffed it.
Yeah,
and we rolled on the table, and he ended up flinging Whelm. He flinged Whelm back.
Flung the back, Spit-Take.
All the way back behind the wall of force.
The wall of force.
It's one of my favourite voices I think Dom has ever done.
It's amazing, yeah. It's amazing.
And Whelm was out of the picture at this point because to get
flung to the ground. Thankfully, there. Although to be fair, Spit-Take with his swim speed, not really an issue anymore. But still, yes.
But for Dom to retrieve it,
not handy in a battle,
would have been a death sentence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, Dom instead, on his following round, pulled out Wave, and in his final attack, or so we found out, Wave channeled all the water in the room to deliver a resounding uppercut, impaling Zonn-Zin, and then sending a torrent of water through his chest. As Caraptus' servant was defeated.
We waved goodbye to him. Not sure if I said that in the session. I'm glad we lost the audio now, because now we have that joke instead.
Unless Dom said it, and
yeah, I just stole it off Dom and just totally claim his joke for my own.
No, because if I remember correctly, Dom went up to you and went, "Well, I think I'm good," and then he started to pass out.
Yeah, he basically. I don't think it. I mean, we have definitely explained what happened, but like Drast being asleep and unable to waken him without magic, only able to wake him with magic, and the amount of damage that Spit-Take took through walking not once but twice through and then back through the wall of fire. I was like, it would only happen to Spit-Take that he would walk through the fire, then change his mind, and then go back the other way. Oh no! So we were both so screwed. Like in that whole fight, it was a scrap of a fight. Dragging Drast back down that corridor was horrible. It was terrifying because I was just waiting for him to pop round. But thankfully, it weirdly panned out where we then got a chance to rally. Basically, we rallied on him and got through that encounter by the skin of our teeth.
Absolutely, and if the thing is, he's a ranged character, and he wants to divide the party. He doesn't want to get up close unless he has to.
Why would he? Why would he? Yeah.
And I think that is sort of, in that situation, that was his downfall. Because if he had pushed, rather than trying to set up another ambush, if he had pushed the two of you, he probably would have seen a different outcome, at least for one of you. But
I think it's like a really good example of a boss fight as well, because generally when you have a boss fight in your dungeon, you have the boss fight has its own chamber, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas this, you just are unexpectedly walking down a corridor, having completed what we felt was, well, we've completed it, mate. Turn the corner, and then, by the way, guys, there's an Afriti in this corridor, and he's going to try and kill you now. Like, it's like, oh my god. So then it's a really reactive boss fight. It's not like you're like, the boss is through this door, we've got the boss key, like in Zelda, let's go and fight him. No, it's like, no, you're in a boss fight right now, deal with it. So
you turn around and there's now a fog wall behind you. It's like, what?
Yeah, oh god. Yeah, exactly. Great comparison. So I loved it for that, but it was a really good fight, very tense. Me and Don were very much like gritty arty, like, yeah, but what about this? What about this? What about this?
Yes, I think the biggest conversations was, but he's asleep. But I was like, no, but as per the spell.
Yeah. I was like, what do you mean? I just use my action to try and wake him. He was like, it takes more than action. I was like, for fuck's sake. Yeah,
I will say what this has done, like, just from a kind of a player point of view.
Yeah.
Like, when I was reading the final bit, was because compared to the other blocks in the module, like Kesnef, the ogre mage, the advanced huge monstrous crab, and Tenmir, the dwarven vampire.
Oh yeah.
Zonn-Zin in the module only has that. It says, here the stats are in the player's handbook. This page, tactics. Prefers to wait. Set up ambushes, and then I was like, okay, this is probably going to be a bit anticlimactic reading it. And then I was looking through the spells, going, I mean, Wall of Fire isn't the most painful, and then, oh boy,
yeah, it's the situation as well, isn't it? Because the natural judgment call in that situation is he's a wizard. Because we don't know he's not a wizard. He's a wizard. We need to get to him.
Yeah.
Do not let him speak. He shall put a spell on us. That's the exact thing. Do not let him speak. He'll put a spell on us. Get to the fucking wizard. Oh wait, he's not a wizard. We've rushed down this corridor into these traps. It's all going horribly wrong. But somehow the luck that served the dwarves from the beginning of this module to the end was there with them.
Yes. And then there was a few other bits that were addressed. As you left, you might remember, Drast left a dwarven note kind of saying the White Plume Mountain was now safe.
Yeah.
As is left on a tag at the bottom, which just says Skyhammer was here.
Skyhammer was here, that's right.
Poor timing.
No, it's good. There we go.
And then you left and you headed back to Yellow Reach, where you were going to make a decision about what you were going to do. Were you going to cash in? Well,
yeah. Well, we're going to take these 3 legendary weapons back to the guy that gave us this mission, and trade these 3 weapons that we've learned so much about, that have so many hidden properties we're yet to discover. Shall we trade those 3 in for 10k? The answer was...
Well, it was even just one of them for 10k.
Oh, sorry, what? Well, there you go then.
Now, I will point out, when I started this module, the 2 of you weren't dwarfs.
That's true. That's very true.
And I will say this, the very first things it sets up is, try to pick a weapon they won't want to keep. So,
no.
With a kobold and a half-elf, I went, they won't want Whelm. That's a dwarven warhammer. Of course they won't. Whoops.
Hang on a second. So these 3 weapons aren't always a hammer, a trident, and the sword, then?
No, they are always those weapons. But when you start the adventure and you start the module, the notes it gives to me is basically look at your party and tried to basically have Daikon Rak. His missing weapon is one that the party are least likely to want.
Yeah, okay.
They can then
I
keep
see.
the others.
Yeah,
and then they can cash in the one they don't want. So I was like, okay, none of you are dwarves, and by the looks of it, none of you ever be able to use a dwarven warhammer. You're more than likely want to cash it in.
Ah, very good.
However, there was a few things that came out at this point whilst you were resting. Drast discovered that wave he actually was quite familiar of from his knowledge. And I will say this, in normal circumstances, you wouldn't have a character who can just know all of these things. But when it comes to a factotum, knowledge is their shtick. Yes. And the whole thing is that it's always the smarts they can apply. So if there's ever a character who would have picked up these little pockets of information, it would be one of them.
So, a factotum's weapon of choice is knowledge.
Yes. And it turns out that somewhere in Drast's memory bank was the history and the backstory of the legend of Wave. And he knew that one of the rituals for Wave was to defeat an aquatic creature who is equal or stronger than you. And it turns out that giant crab did.
Because he was definitely stronger than us.
Mm-hmm.
Categorically.
Yes. But you realised all you then had to do, if you could pay the gold price of 1,500 and sacrifice that loot, you could awaken the properties of Wave. So you did that, and then you started to hear voices in your head as Wave was communicating to you, expressing its thanks for being freed, to which Whelm then joined in, as Whelm, up until the start of the previous session, could not have spoken to you, but when you leveled up, it gained an intelligence score, so was able to then communicate with you both as well.
Yeah.
To which they were both expressing their gratitude, were saying they don't want to go back into a display case, and advised you against awakening Black Razor.
Yeah, both the animate weapons were really, really against Black Razor in every regard. Which made Spit Take more interested in the blade.
Yes. So a decision was made.
A very hasty, ill-advised decision was made.
So 2 decisions were made then. First, Reikendak would keep his money, for you would not return the weapon.
No weapons for him.
Mm-hmm. And then you took yourself far away from Yellow Reach into a little clearing.
Yeah, we just left. We ran away. He'll never find us ever.
For you also knew that the lesser ritual for the least ritual for Black Razor is called Dominating the Blade, and you picked up a lot of oils and components to anoint the blade.
Yes.
And you had to essentially succeed on a concentration check. Failing that would have seen negative levels or worse.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Spit Take took a moment, and then what happened?
So, did he not have to make saves? Like, he did saves, didn't he?
He did a concentration check.
Oh, okay. I think you'll have to remind me, mate. I think he, as far as I recall, all he did was just focus, and then the sword spoke to him, I believe.
He did. You succeeded in your concentration check quite resoundingly, actually.
Well, that's right. Because I was worried, and then I checked, and I was like, but of course, Spitake's highest thing is Constitution. He's a Constitution-based character, and concentration, it's in the name, sort of. So yeah.
And the final message, and the final thing we got on that session was Black Razor relishing in being awake.
I am awake. That was it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is where we were able to conclude White Plume Mountain. And we then made a decision, before we kind of talk about kind of thoughts and what have you, that because we enjoyed these characters quite a lot, and the legacy of these weapons, that we're going to look, well, I'm going to look to try and bring those two back in again in the future, and maybe a more bespoke game that can cater upon the history of those three weapons a bit more.
That's right, because as you alluded to, the module is there for the discovery of these weapons to equip your campaign with these weapons, so that then you can then take them on into further exploits that you arrange yourself, which I really like the concept of. But in terms of our purpose at the moment with Let's Dig Up, it's to explore modules, so that's why we're parking them, because as you rightly said, they're so much fun. It'll be great to come back to them. So Mike's going to run a separate adventure at some point with Drast and Spitake, exploring the dangers of these weapons.
Who knows? Depending on the situation, we may even have a third dwarf we might be able to add into the mix.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, we're working on that for sure, which is exciting, very exciting.
But before we talk about what comes next, I can't ask Drast, but Rob, what are your thoughts on the module?
Well, I'll try and say what our discussion was at the end, and as I alluded to at the start, is that we decided that the module is really, really fun, but it's also really, really harsh in parts of it. Some of those traps, we kind of lucked out in a lot of them. Like I remember thinking back to the room where we had to jump from platform to platform to platform, thinking if one of those went wrong, that's basically death. You then explained to us about that room where, had we missed the crab and hit the membranous wall, that would have probably been instant death, because we wouldn't have escaped, being dwarves as well with a slower speed anyway. And
that may also have prevented the module from carrying on at all if you hadn't.
We actually gamed the module out of function. Like, it can't carry on.
Potentially.
What's that message that comes up in Morrowind? The events have transpired where world can no longer be saved. Do you wish to load the game or continue on in this doomed world, or something like that, isn't it? It's like that in Morrowind. It's basically that message comes up in White Plume Mountain. You're done.
It would be really awful if you were like an NPC. You're just doing something a normal day. You wake up, you go into your NPC duties, maybe you run a shop, and then somewhere out of the blue, this message crops up, and you just know that someone somewhere is just cocked up royally.
Or maybe there's stories that once upon a time there are stories that there's this character that saw this menu and decided to carry on regardless. So you now know that at some point they doomed your world to death and had the choice to stop it and didn't. Some meta plots for you there to run a game about. That would be cool. But we thought it was a fun module, but a harsh module. But that's sort of chat that I think it comes through an era of D&D where it was kind of like this. We're all about actually making this a challenge, a strategic challenge, rather than like a story on rails or whatever. So it felt really challenging in parts, and I think we lucked out with our character generation. I think those characters were both well suited to basically fight anything and skill anything. With the added fact that Spitty could swim and breathe underwater.
Yes, there was some luck, especially in the ziggurat room, where
exactly
if you had to breathe underwater, that could have been horrific.
That would have been the end. I don't see how two characters would have got through that with the penalties to attack underwater whilst trying to breathe underwater, and if you exert yourself underwater, you lose that counter, don't you? Like your breath counter goes down when you try and exert yourself, right? It's something like that, isn't it?
If you're in combat.
Yeah, if you get hit or something, and
if you get hit in combat, you lose a round.
That's it. Yeah.
You can still swim normally.
But thinking about how often we were getting hit, like an owl that we were fighting down there. Yeah, vicious.
Yeah. And I found the bit that I was thinking of, because I was saying it's quite binary in that there's A or B. And here it says, if your players are unused to hack-proof dilemmas, they may find this adventure frustrating.
Oh, because it's so well prepared for. Yeah, I can see that, but I think that's part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah. It's some things are going to you had that potion of fly, so that was fortuitous. If you hadn't. Mm-hmm. I have no idea how that would have gone. If you couldn't breathe underwater.
Yeah, by all rights, they should never have made it out of there, but somehow they did. And it was all rolled in publicly, so it's not like anything was ever obscured from either the player's part or the DM's part. It was all there to see. Just mad what can happen.
Yeah.
In any such scenario. But yeah, overall, fantastic fun. Obviously, incredibly well run by you, Michael. Really well realised, and very satisfying to come out at the end with all three weapons and two characters that I think will remain in our hearts for the rest of this hobby. They've cemented themselves in the pantheon for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, big time.
And in terms of future, one thing that somewhat Let's Dig Up and somewhat this dwarven duo.
Oh, with these guys, okay, yeah.
Firstly, you have 3 impressive weapons, but you have stolen from a nigh immortal wizard.
Yeah.
And you also dispatched pretty much the majority of his servants in White Plume Mountain.
Yeah.
And this is a wizard who can command all of these people.
Yeah.
And for all intents and purposes, has been around a very long time, was responsible for bringing Black Razor into this world, is not a threat to be taken lightly.
No. Which I think is another hilarious thing, because it's 2 bumbling dwarves against the wizard that is bringing the end times, and these 2 sitcom characters that have stumbled into his plot.
I will bring ultimate destruction to this world. Well, Scarhammer to the rescue.
Scarhammer to the face. It was great. We are returning with another Let's Dig Up soon, so keep your eyes out for that, dear viewers. We're not going to reveal what that is, are we? Or we're going to save?
Not yet.
Yeah, we'll save that.
All I can say is considering the length of them, it may actually be 2 modules, bookending. But if that is the case, I will make that very clear.
Yeah.
But it feels a bit of a shame if it's only, say, if you're very efficient, 1 session only, it'll be like, oh, that's a bit of a shame. So it may roll into another small module as well, of which I've got a few prepped.
Which of course means returning to the randomized character creation. They've already been generated, so we know what they are now. But that is randomized stats, randomized class from a randomly determined book from 3.5. We've got some great choices, I think.
Yes, I think potentially the fairest stat rolls we've had. I think for both of you, they've been pretty equal.
Yeah, they're equal between them, and they are pretty much down the wire with some good and some moderate and some bad. So
there's nothing categorically abysmal though.
It's like if you did point by but you were drunk. That's how I would determine.
You had a few spare points and you weren't too sure what to do with them.
Fuck it, just put them in there. Yeah. Done. Yeah, so we have that to look forward to. And next time, hopefully, and I say hopefully, definitely, we will definitely have my sound back. We're gonna have a great time. And yeah, we are closing in on a time where I'm pretty sure we're gonna start making some headway back into the long form campaign. But I'm still genuinely really enjoying the exploration of all this legacy material. So anything you want to say about that before we sign off, Michael?
No, just to reinforce that it's been awesome touching on everything that we found in Let's Dig Up, and by all means, even when we are back with the next campaign, Let's Dig Up isn't going to go anywhere. We will come back to it if we're ever taking a brief break, or if someone's got a hankering to run something.
Yeah.
And I think there's also, it'd be quite nice when we do get Matt back, if he's up for one of these as well. It'd be nice to get that little dynamic, because we've had to change. Most of these are designed to run for 4 people.
Yeah.
So being able to run one for 3 people would mean you can run it a little bit closer to the book.
For sure.
Would be quite interesting.
Absolutely.
However, I'm very much looking forward to returning to Knights of the Apocalypse. I've got some interesting character bits coming up, which I've been prepping and looking to and researching.
I think I mentioned this before we started recording, but yeah, I've been going through some of the early game of the last campaign for preparation, and it's different, man. I can't wait, and lots of exciting things coming up for Roll the Bones. Anyway, big thank you to Mike for having the patience to not only attack me for losing the audio on what was a really, really fantastic session, but also running an excellent game. And we'll be back very soon with another edition of Let's Dig Up. Thanks for watching, and as we say always at the end of one of these, burn them rolls.
Rolls.
Burn them rolls.
Burn them.